Welcome acolytes. Today I am reacting to a video from Killer Whale. And yes, I still didn't figure the stuff out I wanted to figure out, so there's that. But the wild world of competitive Dead by Daylight. If you don't know what Dead by Daylight is, it's actually a game I enjoyed for a long time, and I still from time to time, like, it's really not that often right now, but sometimes I just go in and play it because it's a nice thing. It's basically one of a kind, just hunting survivors with a killer, going out, and basically the most attractive thing about it is the balance. There is no balance. Yeah, I know. I just angered a lot of people by lying. Balance and DBD. That's something you actually almost basically cannot do because it's a asymmetrical game, 4v1. The killer is alone, and he just has to hunt the survivors and well, of them, to be generous. But at the end of the day, this isn't the interesting part about the game. The interesting part is the freaking community. And you might say, now what's so special about the community? Well, the community is particularly toxic in a way. You mean like League of Legends? And I mean, yes, like League of Legends, if not basically the same amount of toxicity, just you cannot write anything down, but even if you cannot write the enemy player, you still can communicate with a lot of things. The displeasure you have for the player, it's just a wild thing. It's really a freaking wild thing. And I stopped playing it just because, well, after a while you're like, okay, good, I cannot be in it. And it also has a competitive yeah, okay, you already know my side to the competitive side of it. It's basically, I'm not gonna say it right now, just I want to hear if he says the same thing, if he has the exact same thinking about it as I have. And let's just start, and the world just okay, I'm sorry about that, but by the way, if you like my content, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, press the notification button. And for those, I'm just gonna say it, I had a near accident today that could have ended bad. That's why if I sound a bit differently or a bit shocked or a bit mad, that's why. Just so you know, it's not an excuse, it's just what could come. So let's just start.
Should you play competitive DBD?
Serious?
Okay, I'll be real.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna get so much shit about this. It sounds way worse than it is. Let's yes, and I'm still laughing because I cannot explain it, for fuck's sake. It's just competitive DBD is basically, if you want a competitive game in DBD, it's basically impossible because there is so much randomness, freaking bullcrap you have to deal with, OP things, and you basically have to restrict a lot of things that the people do and just can do, so some killers even become viable in a competitive sense. And if you do this much rules that you basically just you scuff the game as it is and just make some imaginary rules that the devs just don't follow, because if you're playing competitive, it's a different thing than if you're playing normal. And yes, I still remembered about it because it's just so. And at the end of the day, yes, I personally would prefer if the competitive way of DBD would be the way to go, because it's way more interesting that way. But those are made up rules by the community themselves, not by the devs, and the devs literally don't give a single F about it. And that's just how it is. Sadly. Because as I said, I would prefer if we did it, but the devs are just like, nah, fam. Nah. I don't care. Nah. Okay, let's just... sorry.
With you. I originally wrote this video months ago just to make fun of comp DBD, but after...
Really? No shit, bro. Who wasn't? Like, really? Only... Okay, I am unfair. Sorry about it. No, I am not sorry. F this. Competitive DBD just isn't real. It's real in the case of just basically the toxicity, and the people that are in there are just okay.
After taking a dive down the rabbit hole, I have to admit that there are a lot of misconceptions that it gets unfairly criticized for. Don't worry, there's still plenty to make fun of, which we will get to. But to
yep.
take a look at both sides, let's at least start with the dumb things the haters say. That really just comes from a lack of knowledge about the competitive scene. Like any esports scene, Comp DBD consists of teams of players playing custom games against each other in order to win some kind of tournament. Sounds simple enough, right? But since DBD is an asymmetrical 4v1 game with heavy RNG elements, the immediate question from most players upon learning about competitive DBD is, why the fuck would you do that? To which most comp players...
Yes! Yes! Comp DBD is stupid. Most common players think that. And as I said, before you freaking even think about things, no, I think that competitive DBD is way more fun than actual DBD. Because it actually bans the freaking overpowered stuff. But it's just all made up from yourself. Okay, let's...
Players have a pretty simple answer. They like the game. A lot.
Oh! Okay, I am... Yeah, if I ever heard this answer, I wouldn't react so crass about it. Because if somebody just said, no, I just like the game, I want it to be the way I actually want it to be. That's fair. That's honestly fair enough. If you have fun with this, well, this is beautiful. Yes, I agree. If you have fun this way, that's fine. That's even good. But the problem is if you try to force it on me. And he probably comes to
and
that.
Optimizing and learning every part of it, playing versus other people who really like DBD is the next step for them after they grow tired of the busted mechanics, bad matchmaking, and terrible teammates in public lobbies, things that I'm sure we've all experienced. So the most popular response to Comp DBD...
Oh, and by the way, the terrible teammates aren't just your teammates as a survivor, I think, but also if you just either get stomped shit over or just stomp, both of those scenarios are no fun. And I am a killer bane. Like, I got stomped on and I actually learned the most from it. But the freaking matches where I just stomp people, that just aren't fun. You just go through it, just do it, just go in, do your stuff, go out, and it's done. And sadly, one of the most effective tactics that I got to witness is camping. Just staying on the hook and just being an a-hole, basically. Sadly, but yeah, that's the most effective thing you can do.
That is, laughing at the idea of it, or saying that there's no money in it, or calling it a waste of time, or for some reason claiming it doesn't exist, makes about as much sense as making fun of any other hobby. I play comp.
Okay, I agree with that. Because as I said, I personally think if you argue that it's for fun, because it's fun for you, perfectly fine. As he said, this is a good argument that I'm gonna use it more often because this makes sense. It's a hobby. It's a hobby. It's fun for you. That's perfectly fine. Do it.
DBD because I like DBD is, in my opinion, a good enough reason to not be mocked relentlessly, even if it is kind of funny since most DBD gameplay is such a shit show. Which leads to the next question people ask. How can you possibly make a 4v1 game competitive with how much RNG and busted crap there is in it? And the answer is just as simple. You can't, but also add a lot of extra rules. Banned perk list for every killer and survivor, banned
Yep.
perks for every survivor team versus
Oh,
specific
yeah.
killers, banned add-ons, items, specific map picks per killer, banned RNG actions, the list goes on. The goal of all of these bans is to make the game as skill-focused as possible, by limiting RNG or things deemed way too strong for the amount of effort you put in. And honestly, they do a pretty good job here. If you're a main of, say, Doctor, and you could guarantee...
Yeah, but yes, they do a good job. I will admit that. A lot of people do a good job. Not all of them, but a lot of people do a good job to actually do it, and it took a lot of time.
A decent map and no calm spirit players every time you queued up at only the cost of your eerie add-ons, wouldn't you take it? Of course it's...
Yeah, and for those who don't know this, those are like some extra things you can basically just get, or add-ons, updates. You just slot them in and you get some perks from it. It's pretty basic, but also fun.
It's not perfect. For example, maps still have RNG within their tiles and gen spawns, but tournament organizers do try to get as close as possible to a fair
And that's
game.
fine, by the
This
way.
is a really big point that most haters don't understand. Competitive DBD might as well be a totally different game when compared to normal public lobby DBD, which I'll refer to as pubs for the rest of this video. So if you are trying to make fun of comp DBD by saying, this game isn't meant to be competitive, comp players would probably just agree with you. They're well
Yep.
aware of how many overpowered perks, add-ons...
Oh, no. Comp players, most of them won't agree with you. No.
and items there are, as well as how much RNG, especially map RNG, can factor into a win or loss in public games. I'll let them explain this massive rule set in their own words. With little to no restrictions, the amount of times the better team wins is decreased, the amount of RNG heavily increased, and skill expression decreased, all while significantly reducing the amount of fun playing the game. Side note, for a lot of players that last bit isn't true, but for comp players it definitely is. It's personal preference. But this brings us to the last common criticism, which can't really be mitigated because it comes from DBD's core design issues. The game's most efficient strategies are often considered the least skillful by a majority of the player base. On the survivor side, pre-dropping pallets while the rest of the team sits on generators. On the killer side, immediate tunneling and proxy camping of one survivor. Why would anyone...
And by the way, pre-dropping pellets, if you run away, you can drop a pellet behind you, and that just stops the killers. You can also stun it, the killer with this pellet, and the pellet stun itself has actually a certain effect that if you hit a killer while he's, let's just say, drags a survivor on his back, you can actually stun him and he throws the survivor out. Let's like that. Tunneling is, well, as the name actually says, you tunnel someone until he's dead. And yes, that's a really big problem because it's just boring and nobody likes that. I mean, there are some people that like it, but I never liked tunneling. I did it, by the way, if I really wanted to win, but it's just no fun for any side. But sadly, it's one of the most effective tactics. Not in comp. In comp, they actually know how to counter it halfway decently, but it's still one of the strongest one. And in comp, you actually, if you have a good turn, you actually get discouraged by tunneling, by just getting rid of points.
want to watch this? Well, most don't, which is why the idea of comp DBD is still pretty unpopular among the majority of the player base going into year 9. However, this isn't the full story for a few reasons, and competitive DBD has actually been growing much faster than in years past. The first reason for that is DBD League, which is the main league I'm going to reference since it's the most popular, has gotten much better with balance simplification, killer variety, marketing, and finally started trying to push players away from camping too hard by making the tie-breaking win condition tied to unique hooks. This way, if both teams do all 5 gens, and they have the same amount of hooks, the killer player that hooked 2 different people for 3 stages total would win over the player that hooked 1 person and camped them to death. The former of which usually makes for a better viewing experience. Compare a modern tournament with killers like Oni, Wesker, Plague, Ghostface, and more to the Spirit and Nurse snooze fests of old, and you'll instantly see how much better it is to watch. The second reason it's growing is that popular content creators like Otz, Hens, Otofu, and Spooky Loops have been showcasing competitive...
No, every single one of them, good content creators. If you actually want a lot of information about DBD or even learn it, those 4, and it's irrelevant which one. I maybe would even prefer Otz, because Otz himself, he explains everything so profusely good. He's he's maybe not better than the others, but his explaining is definitively better than every single one of those. Or at least I personally get way easier. I have an easier time of actually understanding what he wants to say, and he actually really goes in the nitty-gritty of it. So, just if you're interested.
Play in a much better way than comp players have. More on that later. But the third reason it's growing is something that's hard for most DBD players to understand on first watch. When both sides accept that these boring tactics are going to be used, the games stay interesting. Yes, it sucks getting tunneled out in solo queue. Yes, it's boring to proxy camp as killer in pubs. But when a full 4-man team knows and accepts that a tunnel out in camp will almost definitely happen, and comes together to prevent it instead of just complaining online, it's kind of fun to watch. Having a player pre-drop their first 5 pallets in a public match is boring to chase, but killers in comp have already planned for this and are setting up their dead zones, strategy, and build around it. If you have a lot of hours on killer, at some point you'll get annoyed at how easy the game can be with just a bit of tunneling and proxy camping, especially when you go out of your way to avoid it and survivors teabag you anyway. Comp DBD doesn't have this problem. Lastly, and most importantly, even with these low skill strategies, there is a ton of skill in competitive DBD, from patience to communication to knowledge to mechanics, and to pretend it's all just camping, tunneling, and pre-dropping instantly signals that you've never actually watched any. I'll also use a common comp player argument here. If skill doesn't matter, why do the same teams always dominate over multiple tournaments? So truthfully, I agree with the original complaint. Optimal strategies are really boring to play with or against in public games where you either stomp a bunch of idiots or have so much less control over
Yep, I agree. I agree fully.
RNG. But in a tournament, it can definitely be more interesting to try it against a group of coordinated players who accept that it's part of the game, and it allows players to push themselves to the limit without having to worry about either side's made-up rulebook. So wait a minute, all of this just seems like a big misunderstanding. Why would so many people be annoyed at competitive DBD when they just innocently play?
Now we're going to the nitty-gritty of why people actually think that's annoying. And I understand it, because I had to do with those people a lot. Or not a lot, like... No, you basically every freaking second game there is some freaking tryhard in it that wants to go in pubs and show that he's the best guy.
Custom games among themselves. Well, if you ask people in the comp community, they apparently have no idea. They're just happily minding their own business while insecure pub players attack them for no reason.
Yeah, sure.
But this in itself is the problem. After watching the comp community for a while now, a lot of their players and viewers are very much living inside a bubble. And when you're in a bubble, you don't understand how you look and sound.
Basically true. This is... this... on point. Yes.
From outside of it. First of all, the most outspoken people either in comp or associated with the comp community are all extremely annoying. If you go to DBD Twitter, which is kind of the only place comp DBD exists outside of Discord, you'll instantly be able to tell a comp player from the incredibly smug aura of their tweets. They will often put down pub players, 99.9% of the player base, as bots and say they crutch on broken items and mechanics. They will call any complaint or loss in public matches a skill issue. They'll have non-stop drama within their own community. Probably due to the fact that most of the people who actually have time for comp DBD are teenagers.
No, I get it.
You're obviously. This is why everybody.
How DC right now without hands-free clip?
The easiest way to get every comp player to respond to your tweet is to post the most obvious bait ever of you sucking at the game, because they will absolutely eat it up. They literally can't help themselves.
Yep.
The comp community is looking for any reason to show off their thousands of hours of knowledge and skill in DBD, usually in a way that's meant to make you feel like a dumbass. They're wildly confused that people just like to play DBD for fun instead of trying to improve, putting down any perk or build that they think will interrupt this quest for maximum skill expression. I don't think it's a hot take to say that people don't really like when others are condescending, and the comp community really doesn't seem to know or care how often they come across this way. But hey, there are smug elitists in every hobby. What makes DBD different? The first issue is that, truthfully, DBD is a pretty mechanically simple game. Yes, it has a massive skill ceiling, but most of this is from game knowledge and experience rather than being physically demanding. There are some difficult things you can do, but you can win 99% of your games without ever learning these.
True.
I'll be honest, I've sucked at multiplayer games most of my life. No matter what I did, my KD was usually barely over 1 when I used to play shooters. But in DBD, I can win most of my games with mostly just knowledge and experience, which is what drew me toward it in the first place. So when a bunch of players start talking about skill expression so often in a game where you can probably win most matches after like 500 hours if you have decent video game experience and don't follow the other side's rulebook, of course it seems really silly. In most games and sports, the top players have 10,000 plus hours in extremely precise mechanics. In DBD, you could probably get there in 1,000 if you actually practiced correctly and just watched videos to gain the necessary knowledge. The second reason is that most DBD players are kind of bad at the game from an objective standpoint. I would say the main reason for this is that there's no way to practice mechanics of any kind on your own, and 95% of the player base is not going to waste time working on flashlight save timing with a friend in a custom game. All the experience most people have is from pubs, where you might get 4 games an hour if you're lucky, and most players are totally fine with this. When everyone is bad, it all evens out and makes for exciting games. Unfortunately, the players that aren't fine with this are either the ones who are extra bad and will blame everything but themselves while demanding balance changes that would benefit them, or the players who have practiced DBD mechanics way too much and are now better than 99.9% of players, not realizing that there's a lot of reasons that almost no one else does this. I'll let you figure out which category comp players belong to. So I'll summarize the first issue with a metaphor. Have you ever started up a co-op game with friends, but you have that one guy who rushes endgame content as fast as possible to get ahead of it?
Oh, who hadn't? Oh, honestly, oh. Yeah. It's disgusting. I mean, we all know, yes, good player and such, but for F's sake.
Everyone else? It kinda sucks the fun out of it for the people who have to play with them, and that's kinda how people feel about competitive DBD players. Most of us can agree that playing against a killer or survivor team that is way better than you is really unfun in this game. Is this fair to complain about? In my opinion, not really. Do I understand why people complain about it? Absolutely. But I think what really annoys most people about comp DBD in particular is the fact that comp players seem to be unaware of how funny their bubble really is. Like they made up a game mode with their own made up rules and somehow that makes them better than everyone who just plays.
Yes, this is the most annoying thing about it. Exactly. You make up some rules in your head, and to be fair, it's to make the game watchable and just be in their mind better, and I agree with it, by the way, so not that. But then to expect random players who don't give a fuck about your specific thing and get toxic about it. Just F off, go out, touch some grass, and all of those good things. It's fine. I agree with you that DBD is better if you do the comp thing, but 99% of the people just don't give a fuck. And let them not give a fuck. That's their choice, their freaking time they invest in it. It's not your freaking time that they invest in it. It's not your time, you don't have to do it, you don't have to play with them. Just let them do what they want to do, for fuck's sake. It's fun. First of all, it should be fun.
This game normally. Reminder, pubs is literally the only game mode in DBD with progression, rewards, achievements, and the only game mode that developers care about, as shown by them leaving tons of spectator bugs in custom games for months now. Everything you do in customs is just something you made up, just like every tournament win that you notch on your Twitch About page is made up by someone else. So even if you are technically right about your opinions on pub players, even if it technically is a skill issue that someone...
And those, by the way, those two he just showed, and I assume he shows more, those are top freaking players. Comp players to the end. If I have our off day of Dead by Daylight, just remember that people who are willing to play with zero profit, zero passion, zero will to improve, and cry about once they become better. The fuck?
Someone's complaining about, no one cares. What people do care about is results. Let me explain. Let's say you have a
Yep, I
pub
agree.
killer or a pub swift who brings the most disgusting, broken builds and wins every public game, and a comp killer or comp team that brings whatever and wins every public game. No one really cares about the fake skill of the former. They're both winning every game in the only game mode that the developers made. End of story. The players on the other side of those games got shit on equally. But I really think that bothers comp players because they're constantly talking about the ego of pub players who are crutching on things that comp players think are OP. This leads them to constantly respond to people who don't really care what the comp community thinks. And it always follows the logic of, if you lost, skill issue. If you won, you were using broken shit and it's still a skill issue. The best example of this is when a comp player loses in pubs. Let's look at Momo7th, a player for the comp team Petroleum, after losing his 1,947 win streak with Blight in public games. Despite being understandably upset after having such a long streak broken, once the endgame...
Understandably upset, but still not acceptable. Okay, let's just remember that. Just because you understand that someone actually flipped a bit out, doesn't mean it's acceptable.
Game chat starts, he immediately says, "Scrim?" Which to me might as well say, "Well, you beat me."
Is he gonna explain it? I don't know. Scrim is basically just a one-on-one. As if you have to prove something to someone you don't freaking know.
In the unbalanced luck-based game, now come prove it in a real game. To which one player hilariously responds, "Nah, I'm good." Comp
Yep.
players really don't understand how funny it is to challenge random pub players to scrims and 1v1s. But the truth is that no one really cares about how skilled you are in a balanced version of the game that you made up. And to accept this truth, that would mean admitting that you've spent thousands of hours obtaining skills that even the developers don't care about. But here in comp...
It's so true, by the way. It's so true. This guy just talks out of my soul. It's incredible. But yes, he's correct about it. And as I said, I actually enjoy competitive DBD, but it's just freaking absolutely freaking toxic.
Player might be pulling the "they aren't a real comp player" card. Similar to the no true Scotsman fallacy.
Yep.
The implication is that only the lower tier comp players go around stomping pubs and challenging randoms and annoying everyone on Twitter, and the top comp players would never do that. I'll let Nightlight, one of the best comp players in the scene,
And did you hear it?
explain it himself.
I'm sorry. Did you hear that? Because that argument is also an argument I heard a lot of about, and it doesn't make sense. Because they are basically admitting that comp players are freaking toxic by saying it's only the low rank comp players. Bitch, you admitted that they are toxic. So what's your freaking point? Thank you for proving my freaking point.
It is because of the low tier, players from low tier teams just trying to have an ego from winning public matches. And they are bringing the sweatiest shit talking everyone. It's always the bad players from comp that talk the most.
Right.
You will never see any of us, for example, go in the pub game and like full on shit on someone. Never.
I think I know. Yep.
The problem I have with this is that 1, you admit that lower tier comp players have yapping issues that give everyone else a bad reputation. So it's still a problem that you should look to fix in the community if you're trying to grow it in a positive way. The other part of this is that only like 2 to 3 teams win consistently, and Nightlight is on one of them. So to him, anyone under him, which is like 99% of the comp community, is probably a yapper. But 2, he implies that top players would never get ego from pubs like these lower tier players do. Okay, let's take a look at Team Eternal, which Nightlight plays for, doing a 4-man escape streak in public games. Now they played this really fair, no repeated perks and trying to get all 4 players out with some amazing games. But in came an ultra meta nurse to stomp on them, and you can hear how upset it makes him, presumably because it's someone egoing in pubs.
I'm playing against Eternal, oh my god. King morons, bro. Guys, I'll get ego from pubs because I can make it.
Why is Scale tilting?
I 4K'd Eternal lost my donuts, look at me.
Alright, fair enough. I mean, a meta nurse stomps like 99.99% of public lobbies. So, like Momo7th, they challenged the nurse to a DBD League rule set match, where the nurse still gets a respectable 2K with 9 hook stages against the best team in comp DBD history, after which Nightlight deleted the VOD, which is always a funny move.
Damn. This nurse was good. And I mean really good. Damn. killing even 2 from of the really top of the top best players as a normie or normal player, damn, like honestly, freaking respect to that. And yet the guy that actually deleted the vote is a bitch. And I don't care if you like him, he's a bitch for that. If you open your mouth, you should also deliver the thing you yap about, and if you don't, then at least admit it.
When you accuse others of having an ego. I've watched a good amount of comp players play public games now, and the general feeling I get is that a lot of them are terrified to lose to a random pub player, which if they really believe DBD was just a big RNG fest, they wouldn't even care about. Even in solo queue, where everyone knows you can lose to things completely out of your control, he gets mad at pub players egoing, nodding at the killer right here, but when the killer nods back...
Bro, this guy just aimed into the fucking ground. Well, like, you have a guy DC on 5 gens. Why do you have an ego? Why do you have an ego? Unlucky. Why is he not me, bro? He is literally the worst fucking slinger player of all time. I'm playing with 3 fucking monkeys on my team.
So yeah, I don't know if I buy the idea that it's only the lower tier comp players and pub players who...
Of course, only the lower tier players. Only them. None of the big boys. No. Never. Never. Freaking Toxicity.
Who have an ego. Back when the infamous 3-gen Skull Merchant match happened, you could tell Nightlight was taking it much more seriously than the troll merchant player CM99 was, even after they won. I mean, the dude backed out of his bet to go bald if X9 won the latest big tournament. That's pure frontrunner ego right there. And you know what's the funniest thing about both Momo and Eternal's pub game losses? They were both from other comp players stream sniping them. So it literally is just comp players egoing each other in pubs over nothing. Yeah,
This is beautiful. Ego eats ego to eat the other ego. This is beautiful. Oh, I love it. Oh, okay. Woo!
I can see why casual players don't think too highly of the competitive scene. Okay, but enough pseudo-psychoanalysis on the comp player ego. Let's talk about another reason a lot of people don't like comp DBD. They worry that comp players' very optimal gameplay tactics, that is, tunneling, camping, and taking every advantage, are spreading to public matches as comp gets more popular. Say someone watches a tournament and notices how every killer immediately goes for the tunnel out as fast as possible. Is it not a reasonable expectation that they might take this energy to public games that they want to win in? If comp keeps growing like it is, more and more players will play like this in public lobbies. And
this is true, yes. Because it's also natural. I don't blame them entirely for it, because a human being wants to win, and the most optimal way to win is basically tunneling. So in pubs specifically, because pub players aren't that organized. And one thing that I am actually quite surprised about is that comps allow communicating of the survivors. That's something I don't understand. You cannot communicate in a pub, and why should you actually communicate in a freaking tournament or something like that? It just doesn't make sense to me personally, but okay, good, it doesn't have to.
Like I said earlier, it's pretty clear that the public player base is just not prepared for this type of gameplay. You can try it out for yourself to see what I mean. But here I actually kind of take the side of the competitive players. It's not their fault for optimizing the game that they were given. Tunneling has been the best strategy for 8 years and counting. If people do it in public games, that's a developer problem for incentivizing it, not the competitive players. I tend to agree that a lot of players have an idea of what DBD should be that doesn't match up at all with what it is. And here, comp players have done a much better job of accepting what it is, at least its core design.
Yeah.
Does that go as far as having filters for every map in the game to give yourself every possible advantage? No, I still think they're huge nerds for that. Now this links up to the final bit of why Nightlight thinks people don't like comps, so let's recap a bit. He says that low tier comp players both have an ego and run around stomping pubs. We both agree on that. This implies that high tier comp players don't have an ego in pubs, on which I disagree. But finally, he says that top comp players themselves are being accused of stomping pub games like this, which will always be vehemently denied by them.
Right. You will never see any of us, for example, go in the pub game and like full on shit on someone. Never.
But top comp players do stream pubs every once in a while, so let's take a look. Here's Nightlight obliterating 34 public lobbies with one of the best builds there is. And no, it's not enough to just win, he has to make sure they have no pub ego. Here's V1 crushing 44 lobbies in a row with a quad slowdown Wraith build. One of the top teams, Elysium, played a bunch of pubs with some of the most broken builds available, although I admit this didn't go like they planned. Here's Xeno, considered by many to be one of the best all-around players in competitive DBD right now, destroying a lobby with one of the best killers in the game and bleeding everyone out while throwing snowballs at them on day 1 of the winter event, while a chat filled with the comp community cheers him on across multiple games. These players are all indisputably top comp players. Is it their right to do this? Sure, I guess, it's all within the confines of the game. Should they keep claiming they never do this?
Bitch! Bitch! Yeah, bitch! Yeah, bitch! Yeah, bitch! Cry!
Probably not. Again, comp players get very defensive at the prospect of losing in pubs and will often accuse anyone who beats them or even wins a chase against them of egoing in an unbalanced game or crutching on broken mechanics. And I'll throw them a bone. They're technically correct that they would win in a pure skill game. But to everyone looking in from the outside, this just reeks of insecurity. The public relations from the players on social media.
Yep, it is. It is, by the way. It is insecurity. It's just, you're literally investing your time in something that just doesn't exist. Come on, of course.
Aren't much better. Ultimately, they are allowed to say whatever they want on personal accounts, but as someone who works in marketing, it does hurt a bit to see them consistently make polarizing, rude, or aggressive tweets that people will obviously associate with comp, whether that's fair or not. Watch any DBD League live stream or comp player chat and people will make the same jokes over and over about no skill, tunneling, camping, etc., all of which boil down to, this is what the average person would say watching this. Isn't that so funny? Turn on any comp player's stream for 5 minutes. I guarantee you will see jokes in the chat about True Talent or Zeb89, who they consider high ego pub players for lack of a better term. Mentioning these guys is the comp player's version of Nerf Pig, to be spammed at any moment for maximum hilarious impact. You could look at this 2 ways. One is that it's good to gatekeep and keep your community only full of people who take the time to actually understand it. Or 2, that it's maybe better to be friendly and helpful to newcomers who justifiably don't see why someone would want to watch what looks like just camping, tunneling, and pre-dropping pallets. Honestly, I understand both, because you don't owe rude first-time chatters anything, but I do wish that at the very least tournament staff wouldn't actively encourage it and just ban them instead. If anything, recent videos and tournaments from big creators should prove that there is a ton of potential interest if comp is explained well enough to cynical first-time viewers. And let's be real, even comp enjoyers can admit that a lot of different parts of it are pretty boring. But just like the killers and survivors in DBD, the hate from pub players makes comp players defensive, which makes them hate on pub players, which makes pub players hate them, and the cycle continues. Of course, there are plenty of down-to-earth comp players who don't do all the stuff I just described, and you don't see their annoying posts because they aren't making them. Zaka and Dan from Team Eternal, the same team with Nightlight earlier, are very chill even in pubs. Laser, Ivan, Pedro, and Xyz are some more great players that don't cause trouble as far as I'm aware. Multiple comp players don't play pubs at all, just 1v1 ladder and scrims, although apparently the 1v1 ladder has its own whole drama, beef, and egoing going on as well, I don't know. They recognize that DBD is just a game, and they don't get combative when people don't understand why they would play it this way. But as with literally everything ever, the loudest parts of the community set the tone for how the world sees them, and they are unfortunately quite loud. So what's my opinion of competitive DBD? Well, I do watch the big tournaments and follow a few players, so I definitely find it interesting overall. But I still think the overall scene has a lot of growing and growing up to do if they want to be respected by the majority of players. I will say that despite playing a game that doesn't really resemble live service DBD at this point, comp players are a lot better than the average player in terms of general gameplay. In my opinion, if the comp scene wants to continue to grow, I think league and tournament organizers should heavily focus on a seamless and beginner-friendly viewing experience, which so far they have been improving. And I think the top level players should try to set a bit better example of not annoying everyone online and giving comp a bad rap, as well as condemning lower tier players who try to do the same thing. Whether you play comp or not, or even if you've never heard of it before, I hope you felt this was a fair look at the scene and gave you some better understanding of why there's so much arguing about it. For what it's worth, all personal DMs, messages, and chats I've had with comp players were very helpful and friendly. And if you're looking to get into the community with an open mind, they will be more than welcoming. If you're just looking to watch comp, I recommend you check out Comp DBD's YouTube channel, which features the best games, tutorials, and highlights from the top players. If you're looking to actually play, V1 has a video that shows you the basics of joining that I'll link in the description, and the 1v1 ladder in the DBD League Discord has plenty of help and tutorials available to get started. I've played it a bit myself and everyone was really friendly, including one player even playing extra rounds just to help me learn more. Although they may be smug and annoying about it, I see no lies when comp players tell you that the fastest way to improve is to play 1v1s and scrims against people that will actually push you as a player. Whether this is actually worth doing for an asymmetrical horror game? That's still up for debate. And unapologetic comp haters should be aware that...
I mean, I don't even find it open to debate. If it's fun for you, then it's worth doing. If it's not fun for you, it's not. That's on you. Basically, that's... It's how I at least see it.
Comp is growing rapidly on YouTube, Twitch, and Discord, as well as having behavior devs donating Eerie shards to the latest DBD League prize pool in big tournaments. After 8 years of DBD, people are looking for more ways to play, and to lose out on all the fun potential just to keep stubbornly hating seems like a waste of time to me. As with most arguments, both pub players and comp players could definitely do more to understand the other's point of view, instead of just spamming insults at each other over Twitter. But I mean, come on, that's no fun at all.
Damn. The guy actually has some really nice words, so yes, the like. I didn't forget it this time, nice. And yeah. As it is, Acolytes, if you actually want to try this, nice little game on DBD, then do what he said, it's fine. I personally would say don't do it, because if you go in, you actually have to invest, like you're going into a community that knows their shit. And they know their shit really well. You're gonna struggle really a lot. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a relatively fun game, so... As it is, good night.